The 19th century and the age of steam saw a huge expansion in Britain's railways. For the first time, the middle classes of cities like Liverpool and Manchester were able to indulge in leisure travel.
And in 1846, a new railway station opened in the heart of Blackpool on Talbot Road, which meant they could get to the seaside. The Blackpool day trip had arrived.
The coming of the railway meant coastal resorts all around the country were hit by waves of visitors. Blackpool businessmen, keen to tap into day trippers' spending power, competed to provide suitable entertainment. And for the Victorians, that meant a pier. Historically, piers were built solely for ships to load and unload goods. But in 1814, Ryde on the Isle of Wight became the first place in the country to have a pier with a dedicated section for people to stroll out over the sea. The Promenade Pier was born, and in 1863, Blackpool's North Pier opened for business.
It's really a magnificent structure, and the idea of holding it all down with the big girders and bracing with these trusses between the things gives it an enormous amount of strength.
Yeah.
Historian and author Peter Walton is an expert on how the Victorians transformed the British seaside. A group of Blackpool's leading businessmen got together and stumped up £5 each to fund an architectural competition. The goal? To design a pier that would be bigger and better than their local rivals.
The winner of the competition was one Eugenius Birch.
Was that seriously his name?
That was seriously his name.
Eugenius?
Yes.
What sort of man was he?
He was obsessed by engineering, but he was also a man of great imagination and was part of the great sort of 19th century evolution of industrial Britain. Engineers who go anywhere, do anything, build you anything. And he built piers.
Eugenius Birch was responsible for 14 of Britain's best-loved Victorian piers, including the now derelict West Pier in Brighton. However, he made his name designing Margate Jetty on the Kent coast, where he deployed a new construction method previously used to lay the foundations of lighthouses. It proved so resilient to the elements, he adopted the same methods here in Blackpool.
He had pioneered using cast iron instead of wood. He drove cast iron piles in, but they were screw piles.
So instead of straight into the sand and then the clay, it sort of screwed down into it.
Yeah. That had at least two advantages. One, it was quick, much quicker than using a hammer to drive a pile in. And the other was that the clay formed itself round the leaves of the screw and anchored the pile in very solidly, but so solidly that some of his piers have had to be blown up finally. The foundations refused to go away.
In total, around 760 tons of iron were used in the pier's construction to help withstand the notoriously unpredictable Irish Sea. Despite the teething problems, by May 1863, the pier was ready. The entry fee was set at twopence, equivalent to around £5 today.
So, when it was opened, who was it aimed at?
It was aimed at the more quality visitor, and it was designed to offer them a promenading solution because the promenade on the land was just not quite fit for purpose. It was a bit muddy, a bit sandy. The pier offered a very smooth, stable surface, but it also took them out across the sea.
Did they come principally for the sea air and all that sort of thing, or did they come to be seen?
They came for the sea air, they came for their health. That is what is driving visitors. But then while they are here, you get a culture developing. Promenading is an activity where you dress your best, people see you in your best. You know, you are on show, especially on this pier, you are on show.
And showing off.
And showing off, definitely.
For Victorian holidaymakers, part of the experience was writing home about it. So in 1870, the post office issued the first postcards.
Visitors to Blackpool loved to send home images of its famous landmarks. But with the back of the postcard for the address only, any message had to be squeezed around the picture.
Just enough room for "Wish you were here"?
Blackpool's success was based on catering to holidaymakers' every need. The emphasis was on fun and providing novel new experiences that people would pay for. When the world-famous Blackpool Tower opened in 1894, it was an instant sensation. Blackpool Tower was reportedly inspired by the Eiffel Tower in Paris and proved one of the great engineering feats of the Victorian era. But financial problems meant it very nearly didn't get built.
Who was behind it at the start?
Well, originally the idea came from a company based in the Isle of Man. What they did was they got people's money, they got construction underway to give confidence, but then they basically disappeared with the money.
John Bickerstaff, or Mr. Blackpool as he came to be known, was the cousin of Robert Bickerstaff, who turned round the fortunes of Central Pier.
Bickerstaff, who's the great figure behind the tower, steps in, refinances the whole process, and actually, because he's involved, other local business people come on board, and that's how he saved this tower.
Building the tower also required a huge engineering effort. The 4 enormous legs were sunk in a foundation of clay, concrete and steel to help withstand the gale force winds that regularly buffet the promenade.
It's a project on an epic scale, isn't it?
Yes, 2,500 tons of steel.
Gosh.
It took 3 years to build, £300,000 to... the cost of it was just absolutely staggering at the time.
£300,000, what would that be these days?
Around 24 million. And, you know, of course, it was an incredibly Victorian achievement. They absolutely loved their engineering.
At 518 feet and 47 stories high, Blackpool Tower was Britain's tallest building. Victorian ingenuity also provided a means of getting to the top. The world's first ever powered lift was built in 1823 by British engineers Burton and Horner. Their steam-powered ascending room gave visitors to the London Coliseum in Regent's Park a panoramic view of the skyline, but it was slow and unreliable. So the designers of Blackpool Tower turned to the latest in lift technology. 3 gas engines powered 2 hydraulic lifts, capable of whisking visitors to the top in around 60 seconds.
Wow. You get a real idea of just how big the beach is from here. I mean, what it must have been like for the Victorians.
For the average Victorian who'd only ever climbed a flight or 2 of stairs, the biggest thrill was stepping out onto one of the viewing platforms.
Oh dear.
And there are still 2 more flights of stairs to climb to reach the highest viewpoint.
What a view. What a view. And you could, just being up this high must have been an extraordinary novelty for Victorians.
Yes, and that describes it perfectly. It was about novelty, it was about thrill. They loved fairground rides, and of course this would have been something absolutely unique to them. So it must have been incredible coming up in those lifts to actually get to the top and see all of this, a view that, you know, unless you're on top of a mountain, you would never normally have had.
No, it's difficult, isn't it, to put yourself in the position of Victorians with their much more limited experience. What did they make of it, do you think?
I think it was the holiday experience, certainly for most Victorians in the Northwest, mill workers particularly. Of course, the tower, there's the great legend that it was built on bales of cotton, because that's not about its foundations, it's about the money from the mill workers that came and spent here. So one of the world's first working class consumer economies, perhaps.
Yeah. How much did it cost?
Well, of course, to come into the tower itself was 6pence. That would have been quite a bit of money, and you probably would have only done it once in your trip, but you would have been able to say, I went to the top of Blackpool Tower. Like today, we are prepared to pay for an experience. And that was exactly, I think, how they saw it. You know, the figures showed that it was incredibly popular from the day it opened.